Hi, what we've got here is a pair of NuTone IS405 inside remote stations. The IS405s were used with the IM and IMA 4006 systems. This is an early one. This would be an IS405L in Adobe White. Adobe White is not white. It's somewhere in between almond and ivory. It's sort of the color of vanilla ice cream. How about that? And this would have been made sometime between 1986 and probably the end of 1990. And here we have an IS405 white, and that would have been made 1991 through the end of 1995. These are interchangeable models. By all appearances, other than the color, they're exactly the same, but they're not. They're actually very different in one respect. And that's how the terminations from the wire that comes down through your wall hooks up to the back of each station. The original IM 4006 intercom systems used something new and different. They used flat ribbon cable like this. This is IW6R. This was a new idea that NuTone had. They had moved away from standard IW6, which is 3 twisted pair cable, to the IW6R because the idea was making the terminations on the back of each speaker and at the master station on the terminal board would be quick and easy for an installer because all they had to do was take the cable and with a pair of scissors cut the end off nice and square, take one of these little connectors that came with the installation kit for each speaker, put the wire in the connector the right way around, slip it in like that, and then use a pair of pliers to crimp it closed and it bites into the cable and makes the connections, and that's it. Someone with a little bit of practice, you could trim out a speaker like this. You could put the connector on the cable and crimp it and plug it onto the back of the station, and it would take you maybe 10 or 15 seconds to do that. So it was really quick and easy, a lot faster than cutting open a cable, unwrapping the twisted pair wires, stripping the ends off, and then putting them under screws. So it was a good idea. Unfortunately, it was an epic fail. It was a fail because installers didn't read the instructions that came with the installation kit for each station, and they would put the connectors on the wrong way around or put the cable into the connector the wrong way around, and then they had a hard time dealing with the way the connector connected to the individual conductors inside the cable and lots of other problems. I personally had done, 1,000 service calls that involved just going out and replacing connectors on IW6R because they were done incorrectly and NuTone covered it under warranty. Around 1991, they abandoned the IW6R ribbon cable design and went back to standard IW6. What this means to you is you have two different types of stations. The early stations like this are ribbon wire stations. Here's our ribbon wire, and here it is with the little connector on the end, and it's plugged into its mating socket on the circuit board, and that's how the connections are made. On the later ones, we have IW6 cable. It's 3 twisted pair cable. You have a red pair, a black pair, and an orange pair. One wire in each pair has a white stripe to identify and index it so it can be hooked up correctly. So essentially you have red, red, white, black, black, white, and orange, orange, white. And it's an entirely different circuit board because this one has 6 screws that you put the wires under to make the connections. Other than how the wire is terminated, these two stations are completely and totally interchangeable. They function the same way, they have the same switches, the speaker cones are the same. It's just a matter of the circuit board and how the 6-conductor cable is terminated. Now you might be thinking, well, that's all great, why do I care about that? Well, the reason you should care about that is because recently NuTone stopped making the little crimp-on connectors. They are no longer available. They don't plan on making any more. And they're also not sharing with anybody who made the connectors. And as of now, we haven't been able to figure out who that is to find exact matches for them that could be used on service calls and things like that. And these connectors do have problems sometimes, and you have to take them off the cable. And they were designed originally to be a single-use item, so if you pry them off the end of the cable, when you put them back on the second time, they may not make a good connection or any connection at all, and then your station doesn't work correctly. So the lack of these is part of the reason for this video. We don't have very many of these left. As things are done nowadays, by the time we find out that something like this has been discontinued, they don't have any more in stock, and that's kind of the end of it. So we're going to hold on to these like grim death because we need them for service calls and things. How this impacts you is, if you have a station, an early one like this with the ribbon wire, and you have a problem with this and you need to replace it, what are you going to do? The most common area that you might deal with this problem are on outdoor patio stations, because outdoor patio stations are the stations that tend to wear out first. They're outside in the weather, they're exposed to the wind and the rain and the sun and the snow and tornadoes and locusts and all those sort of things, and they have a hard life, and eventually they get really ratty looking, the speaker cones fail, and sometimes the switchboards will have problems also, and these switchboards of course are not made any longer. So if you need to replace it, what are you going to do? Well, what I'm going to show you today is how you can replace a station like this that uses IW6R and the crimp-on connector with a station like this. These are more plentiful and these are easier to deal with because you don't have to worry about the ribbon wire and the ribbon wire connector. You just connect up to the screws. But you might be thinking, well, we've got ribbon cable. How do we do that? That's what I'm going to show you. It's not as hard as you might think. When NuTone made the changeover, say in 1991, between ribbon cable speakers and twisted pair speakers, the installation sheet that came with the new twisted pair IS405s like these included a little drawing and a description of how you can take ribbon cable and connect it up to this type of speaker. And that was done because sometimes people may have started building a house a year and a half before they were ready to trim out the intercom, and by the time they bought the equipment, the world has changed and we have these now, and instead of leaving people in the lurch, they gave you a quick and easy way to do that. So that's what I'm going to show you right now. Now remember, on the back of our newer style IS405, we have 6 terminals for wires, and the wires are in pairs. You have red, red-white, black, black-white, and orange, orange-white. If we take a piece of IW6R, like this one, or let's take this one off this station. Let's pretend this is a patio station and you're going to replace it. First, you take the screws out, you take the speaker off the wall, and you simply unplug the connector off the terminal board. And since this is all worn out and a dirty, grungy old patio speaker, you can throw it in the trash because nobody really wants it. So what do you have left? Well, what you have left is hopefully about a foot or so of IW6R sticking out of the stucco in your house, and on the end of it you've got a little connector just like this. So what are we going to do? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off the connector off the end of it, so we just have a plain bare end cable. So here's a close-up view of our IW6R with the connector on the end, and we need to cut the connector off the end of the cable. Now, if you're an electrician, you'll be tempted to use your wire cutters to do this. Hopefully all of you watching this are not electricians, because that's not the right way to go. What you need to do is cut it carefully with a pair of scissors, like this pair right here. These blue-handled scissors, these are the scissors that I carry in my tool belt with me every day on service calls and things like that, and I've been walking around with a pair of scissors in my tool belt since, I would say, I don't know, 1982. Because scissors come in really handy. You do get a certain amount of flack from guys on job sites sometimes about, hey kid, what's the scissors for? But they don't know because they're trying to cut the cable with wire cutters. So they got no idea. So what you do is you just line it up, and you want to cut it reasonably close to the connector. Don't waste any of the length of the cable. If you got 12 inches, don't cut it 6 inches up the cable and waste 6 inches. You want all the wire that you can get. So you want to cut it right here next to the connector. And when you cut it, the way I like to do it, if you practice, you can cut it once and you end up with a nice square cut like that. You don't want it to be all at an angle. If you're not well practiced at it and you cut it the first time and you end up with something that looks like this, that's not very good. See how it's all like at a 45-degree angle? That doesn't really work very well for what we're going to do. You want a nice square cut. So if you cut it at a crooked angle like this, all you really have to do is just take your scissors and cut it a second time so you've got a nice square end. After we've done that, we've got a nice straight piece of ribbon cable, and what I like to do when I do this in the field at someone's house is I take the wire and I pull it through my fingers like this, and that gets all the kinks and everything out of it, so it's straight and it's reasonably flat, and all like that. So that just makes it easier to do what we're going to do next. Now, this is IW6R. The 6 means there are 6 little individual wires inside the ribbon cable. And what we need to do is we need to cut the ribbon cable into little individual strands so we end up with 6 individual little wires. Now, to make it easy, we need to cut up the cable about 4 inches because you need enough wire to work with. If you only cut up 1 inch, it's not going to reach between all the screws on the back of the speaker where we're going to connect it up. 4 inches is better. So all you have to do is take your scissors and take your ribbon cable and very carefully put it between the raised ridges in the cable. So can you see the raised ridges? Let's do it this way. So you can see here we have a blue stripe and there's a ridge right next to it, and then there's a indentation and another ridge and an indentation and another ridge and an indentation and another ridge, and so on and so on. Each ridge is the wire that's inside the cable, and what we want to do is cut in the flat spots in between the ridges, leaving the insulation around the ridge to insulate it, to cover it up, so they don't actually touch places where they're not supposed to. Now this is going to be kind of hard to show you on camera, but I'm going to try because you're probably all worth it. So there's our cable with the ridges, and what I'm going to do, and hopefully you can see, is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to very carefully just cut up the cable like that. See how easy I made that? There's 1 strand. That's 1 wire now, and it's got insulation on it just like it's supposed to. Now you have to do this a few more times. And yes, I know I make it look easy. Maybe. I'll probably mess up now. But if you've done this 100,000 times, it's not that hard. So now what we've got is an IW6R that began like this as 1 solid ribbon, but now we've got 6 individual wires. And 6 individual wires is very much like the 6 individual wires that come out of NuTone IW6. Remember, 3 pairs, red pair, black pair, orange pair. You're going to need to know that later on. And there might be a test. So if you don't write it down, you can always go back and watch it again. But maybe writing it down will help. So what are we going to do with these? Well, now that we've cut these into individual strands, now we need to strip off some of the insulation off the end of each one because we have to be able to get to the bare wires. Get whatever your favorite type of wire strippers are. I'm going to use these because that's what I have here on the bench. And what you need is, you need about 3/4 of an inch of wire of insulation stripped off. See, about 3/4 of an inch? That's plenty. So do them all at one time. I like these kind of wire cutters because they have in the jaws, they have little notches. See, little notches? And the little notches are labeled on the jaws of the stripper as to what gauge wire fits inside the little notch. If you put the wire in the right size notch, when you close it, it cuts the insulation off, but it doesn't nick the wire, and then you just pull it and it pulls the insulation off. These are very handy, and you can buy these at the home improvement store or the hardware store. A cheap pair will cost you maybe $4 or $5. A nicer pair like these, they might cost you a whopping $9 or $10. So buy the good pair. They'll last forever. Don't leave them outside where they get wet, because then they get rusty and then they don't squeeze well. Let's go ahead and strip back the last 2. And now we've got our IW6R that we've cut into strands, and we've stripped off the insulation off the end of each strand, so now we have bare wires. Now when you do the stripping off of the insulation, you're going to find one of 2 things. Early IW6R, the wire inside the cable was a solid conductor. That means it's one solid piece of wire that comes out of the insulation. Later IW6R, they changed to stranded wire. And stranded wire means there's a whole bunch of little bitty wires inside each conductor like this. See, they're all sort of spread around there. It's stranded wire. It's little bitty strands, and then they're twisted together inside the cable to make one bigger one. If you have solid conductor, you're good. You don't have to worry about it. If you have stranded conductor like this, what you need to do is you need to straighten them out like this, and then you need to just twist them together. Because when you put them under the screws on the back of the speaker and you tighten the screw down, they're supposed to be like this. If they're not twisted together, when you tighten the screw down and the head of the screw presses on them, they're all going to go like this and spread out and be sticking out everywhere. And you don't want that, because that's how you get connections. You get short circuits and connections that aren't supposed to be made, and then things don't work properly. So again, how long is this going to take? This is going to take you like 15 seconds to do. So it's not really a big deal. All right. So now we've taken our IW6R, we've cut it into strands, we've stripped off the insulation, and since we have stranded wire inside the cable, we twisted all the strands together, so now it's almost like a solid piece of wire. It's not going to splay out when we tighten down the screw and create problems because we've got short circuits. So now that you've done this, the next thing we have to do is we have to connect it to the back of our replacement patio speaker, for instance. Now, we need to take this cable off of here because this was just an example. But remember, it's 3 pairs. You've got the red pair, you've got the black pair, and you've got the orange pair. All right, this we don't need. We'll throw that over there. All right, so let's say that you buy a replacement patio station and it's ready to go to be put on outside, but you've got to hook up the wires. And remember, 3 pairs, red, black, orange. And if you look carefully, you'll see next to each screw, it says what color wire goes there. So this screw, it says red. This screw says black. This screw says orange. Down here it says orange-white. This one says black-white. And over here we have red-white. So it's all labeled for you, so it's nice and easy. But the question you're going to have is, well, that's all great, but how do I know how to do this? This doesn't have any of those colors. This is all gray. How do I know which one goes where? Well, that's a really good question. Remember how I told you that when NuTone switched over to stations that used NuTone IW6, they included an installation sheet that told you which color in the IW6R corresponded with which screw connection on the back of the new style speakers. And I'm going to include a copy of that actual sheet at the very end of this video so you can see it, because it's very clear. But I'll go over it with you anyway because you'll want to have me tell you. So if we look at our NuTone IW6R, we're going to look at the end that we haven't cut into strands yet because it will make it easier for you to understand. One edge of the cable right here has a blue stripe on it. And the blue stripe travels, no matter how long the cable is, there's a blue stripe all the way on it. If you have a cable that's 600 feet long, you have 600 feet of blue stripe. So that's your indexing stripe. That tells you which side of the cable you start from when you're going to do anything has to do with hooking up the cable. So blue stripe, that's number 1. That's blue. So that's your index. That's where you have to start. If you're starting on the other side or you're starting in the middle, it's wrong and it won't work. You get it all messed up. You have to start on the blue side. So if we go back to the end that we stripped off, we still have a blue stripe. It's right here. It's on the very first strand that we cut off. See the blue? So we have blue, and then we have the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one, and the last one, which is the 6th one. So the color coding is, and see, I don't even have to look this up. I know this by heart because I've done it, again, 100,000 times. So you just, one of those things NuTone guys have to know. Start with blue. It's red, white, red, orange, white, black, white, black, and orange. How about that? And see, I didn't even write it down or put it on a whiteboard. It's not, there's no cheat sheet over there. There's no post-it on the workbench here with that written down. It's just something we all know. So let's go over it again. You start with the blue stripe because that's your index. Red, white. Second one, red. Third one, orange, white. Fourth one, black, white. Fifth one, black. And the sixth one, orange. I'm going to do it one more time. Red, white, red. Orange, white, black, and orange. So it's really very simple. And like I said, there'll be a picture of the diagram that came with the speaker at the very end of this video. So if you can skip ahead and see it if you want, or you can watch the whole video and be a real trooper and learn something. So we're going to start off with our blue wire, which one is it? Red, white. So you put it under the screw that's marked red, white. And what's the next one? Red. We'll put that under the screw that says red. And then we have orange, white. And guess where that goes? That goes under the screw that says orange, white. And see why I told you you have to cut it back 4 inches, make 4-inch strands. See how they're all stretched across the board? If you only made 1-inch strands, it's not going to reach from here to here, and then you're going to have to do it again. Then we have black, white. And then we have black. And then we have orange. Orange is the last one. And when I do this out in the field, that's exactly the way I do it. I do it in the proper orange. Red, white, red. Orange, white, black, and orange. You do it the same every single time. You never change, because that way you're less likely to make a mistake. You get 2 of these backwards, and if you're doing 3 or 4 of these in a house, then it won't work right. Then you got to go look and see where you made your mistake. And nobody likes redoing something they just did. So now here's our newly installed replacement patio speaker, for instance, with our IW6R that we've converted into individual strands to hook to the back of a 6-connection speaker board. The other end, which will be connected to the terminal board behind the master station, it still has its connector crimped onto the end of it, and it's plugged into the terminal board. So the order of connections here corresponds with the order of connections across the cable, therefore into the connector, therefore into the socket where it's plugged into the terminal board, and everything's happy and it all works. And that's how you convert the ribbon wire cable from an original early NuTone IS405 that uses ribbon wire to work with a later style IS405 that has a screw terminal switchboard. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps it'll be helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that always helps. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell or on the wheel, put in your email address, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video. Don't forget, the instruction sheet's coming up. Get ready for it. Here it comes.